Welcome to this special session, which is dedicated to those who we refer to as the older generation. And joining us today is a special guest, Margaret Young, Chairperson of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People, or GAROP, as we call it, and the founder of Age Knowble, a Canadian social enterprise. Margaret's career evolved from being an award-winning corporate professional to an agent of change for older people. A key area of her current exploration is the connection between older people and social activism. Her work centers on human rights and the human development of older people and regards intersectoral collaboration as key to achieving social change and social good. So here we have Young for the old. Welcome, Welcome, Margaret, and thanks for being with us at this early morning hour for you. Margaret, with the number of people in the world aged over 65 expected to double in the coming decades and reaching an estimated 1.6 billion by 2050 as it is projected, population aging is a growing reality around the world. And yet, human rights of the older people continue to slip on the blind spot. If we look at the average age of world leaders, top political decision makers and policy makers, most of them, if not all, are senior citizens or soon going to be one. How can an issue that affects those who make a decision, as well as for so many of us, not get due attention? We would love to hear from you on that.
Well, thank you. It's a really great question, and one that we all kind of reflect on as we see like leaders in different fields who are older, and we wonder why human rights of older people are not more visible. So, first, I'd like to also thank you, Shobha, and to the CN News for today's opportunity to discuss about the human rights of older people. This great question, when I reflect on it, there's actually probably two key areas, if I can summarize, where the blind spots might be at. So the first one is when we think about aging, older people, we always think about the aging phenomena, not human development. So what I mean by that is that we think about, okay, what social, isolation, long-term care, social security, and they're all very important. Yet there's not the other side of the framing on potential, abilities, desires, and wants in any age, and also in older age, right? So the human development piece is not there. And when we talk about human development, it's really about the opportunity to develop a life that we want, and the UN agency on human development actually has a very good definition. It focuses on, building the knowledge, abilities to have a life of adequate standard of living, a life of knowledge, a life of long health, good health, and it focus on like key elements such as human security, human rights, equality. So when we start to think about, things in that lens of human development, we start to look at, rather than aging, the older person, which is very important, right? Because as individuals, once we look at the individual, then it becomes more real. And it's an opportunity to then say, hey, older people are different in all the diversity. They are they're rights holders. And then there is the need then to kind of think about, okay, with that, what does it mean to have human rights? What does it mean to be not to be a stereotypical image of frailty or burden or apathy? So we start to realize that, then we then realize that it's not only the leaders themselves, the ones that are visible, but that every single one person it's important. And also with that framing, then the power come back to the older person, because it's older person who has the political power, the social power, the power in the community. It's not aging itself. So I think it's very important to flip that kind of concept, because when we talk about, for example, rights or the child, in any spaces, even in UN spaces, we don't say it's aging between toddler to youth. We say it's a child. So it's very centered on that. So that's the first part. And the second has to do with some of our kind of ageist attitudes and behaviors toward aging, and then needing to kind of flip once again that paradigm on that, because then it kind of feeds into that. The other broad kind of piece, in the beginning I said there's one and two pieces. The other broad piece is about human rights movements themselves. So when we think about the human rights movement, it's about people pushing back from being oppressed, them wanting to have that justice, that social justice, a restitution or solution. So when we think about movements that we've seen historically, be it anti-apartheid in South America, women's suffrage for the vote, it's really the constituent that's feeling the oppression who's very vocal. In this case, for older people, it's not as much the case, because of the fact that older people, even the older people are not vulnerable at all, but they become, they're in situations of vulnerability because, for example, chronic pain or other life circumstances such as accumulated lifetime of disadvantages. So they're less able to speak out loud and speak out consistently. So then with that, as we all know, to make any change, especially social change, human rights, equality, and so forth, we really need the people to speak up. So therefore, it's even more important that all generations come into this advocacy work. So think of it a little bit as for the child. When the Convention for the Child was developed, the child couldn't really articulate. Like, we can see the evidence, right? So therefore, we need more of that piece of it. So I think those are kind of like the two blind spots when we think about the lack of or a greater need to focus on human development, as well as how we approach elevating the voice of older people. Like at GAROP, we create specific platforms like video campaigns where older people can speak up, or we fund them to go to like to UN spaces to advocate for themselves. So we need more of that, those type of changes. Yeah.
Okay, so you are talking about GAROP. So can you share more on the rally organized by GAROP, and also with the upcoming meeting of UN Open-Ended Working Group on Aging next month? Please share what are the key issues you and GAROP are raising.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the global rally, it took place on the April 8th week. And it's really a moment in time when we said, as collectively, globally around the world, that we want to have our voices synchronized at the same time to be heard for that impact. So what that looks like is events in different parts of the world, be it groups gathering together for a discussion about age discrimination, ageism, or meetings with governments to talk about the inadequacy in current human rights standards. Could be a social media campaign, different types of events that happen. And so the global rally itself is part of the Age with Rights campaign, and that campaign actually campaign or movement started in 2020 when we looked at the fact that we need to have a grassroots movement, to onboard more public masses, to say that, hey, older people are rights holders, to say that current human rights standards that to promote and protect older people are inadequate, that we want a UN convention. So the framing around all this is really about the older people being rights holders, that we want governments to recognize the gaps that exist today, right? And to have that global rally. So the global rally started in 2022 as the first rally, and it started as one day. And then subsequently in 2023, it because of the overwhelming response, it became a whole week. And between that time period, the outreach in terms of online outreach more than doubled at 2.8 million. So it's really a sign that people, that as we do our respective work, advocating nationally that there is a desire to come together. And we deliberately positioned the global rally about 4 weeks before the open-ended working group on aging that you referred to, where it's a forum at the UN in New York to discuss the current gaps that might exist, and then to come up with solutions. So that's the mandate of that working group. And this coming year, the session will be in May, and there are like a couple of key things that's happening. So one is the fact that since last year, when we ended the session, there's been a work. The working group is mandated some work to headed by 2 member state co-facilitators to look at, very closely what are the current gaps, if there are any, in the international human rights instruments, and then and then what to do about them, right? What are the proposed recommendations? And in those discussions throughout the summer, there's been discussion involving like UN bodies, independent experts, NGOs, NHRIs, academia, on what all that, like what is it that we're talking about? And currently, they being the member states are looking at those discussions as well as the body of evidence from all previous working group sessions, and then to say, okay, what recommendations will we make to the open-ended working group session coming up, as well as to the General Assembly. So that's a key piece of happening that'll be happening at this coming session. The other key piece is the fact that the current session of the open-ended working group on aging may be the last 1 or 2 sessions in its current form, because with the open-ended working group on aging, there has been a mandate to look at different topics over 1 or 2 topics a year, and the number of topics actually ends this coming session. So at this intersection of, okay, all accelerated work by member states, we don't know what's happening. What we at the Global Alliance, which means us, GAROP, and all the different NGOs and NHRIs are looking at is a few things. So first is we want, and we have been, and we're doing some work to encourage member states who haven't acknowledged the gaps yet to really take a good look at the gaps, because and to close them, because they exist. There's been like all these years of evidence, be it paper or reports by OHCHR, be it evidence from the field, from NGOs and NHRI. So the evidence is there. We need to close the gap. Second is that we need to close the gaps with a new instrument, a new international legally binding instrument, so that there are the standards that exist, as well as the process to monitor and report on implementation. So those are kind of like the 2 key things. And then, so we want drafting to start now, right? It's been a long time. It's time to start drafting. And as well, we want to make sure that regardless of how open-ended working group on aging evolve or change or whatnot, that there continue to be a dedicated space within the UN system with funded resources to continue the work on identifying and writing up the normative, identifying the normative elements to close the gap, to have an instrument so that we move forward, so that the work continues. So that's kind of like what's happening and what we're advocating for the open-ended working group.
So consider myself as part of GAROP, and we are one team when it comes to human rights of older people. Margaret, can you please share your reflections on the gender dimension of aging? It's very, very pronounced, particularly in many Asian countries, and so would like to hear something about that.
So the understand is the gender dynamics of aging relative to perhaps like human rights of older people. Is that what you're thinking? Or
yes,
older
yes,
women?
yes.
Sorry, yeah.
Older people, yes, gender dimension, women and older people in the case of older. Yes.
Yeah. So then if we think about one of the greatest triumphs we have is the work around human rights of women, right? Globally, everybody has been supporting it. There's been a lot of changes. There's as we all know, there's a commission on the status of women that meets every year to continue to build on that work. And there is, of course, like CEDAW, right?
Yes.
The Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So all that we need to be really proud of and continue to build on, no doubt. But the gap that exists is that older women and the human rights doesn't appear or is not as visible at all. And the reason why I say that is that, for example, if we look at CEDAW itself, there's Article 11E that looks at, refers to Social Security in older age, but nothing else really, right? And it's, somewhat reasonable because at the time that, it was drafted and adopted and ratified, the aging phenomenon is not as strong as it is today, right? In terms of the number of older people and the dynamics and the complexity of it all. And then subsequently, there was the recommendation, I think it's 27, on older women and their human rights. The recommendations were made around, non-discrimination, equality for older women, and yet we continue to see in different situations, be it every day in terms of poverty, be it the right to Social Security relative to poverty, or be it relative to humanitarian issues, right? During war conflicts or during like a natural disaster, older women suffer, disproportionately. So to really center on advancing the rights for older women, it is a convention on the rights of all older people, including older women, including LGBT people, people, including people from rural areas and whatnot. Because, even with the, I think it was like 2023, GAROP and Seroptimus International, a very recognized and respected group for women and girls, we did an event, a parallel event that focused on rallying for the rights of older women in rural areas around the world. And we invited like really great speakers with expertise and lived experience from different parts of the world. So we were, quite happy with them, and we had a fairly good turnout. But what I did was during that session, the parallel event itself has like hundreds of sessions, and I kind of search, with keywords like ageism or older people, older women, aging. I could find really a handful of events focused on older women. And every time when the recommendations are being made, I know that my colleagues who are closer to the work on that work very actively to try to incorporate older women in there. So the idea of incorporating a gender perspective into existing instrument doesn't really work. Yeah.
Yes, that's good. Any other thing you would like to share, Margaret? And any message for the older people, and any of your other final thoughts?
Yeah. So, I think maybe two final thoughts. When we talk about human rights, and even before I got into this work about human rights, it's very abstract for most people. We don't think about it. We think about the laws that protect us. We think about the policy that so forth. But what we really do need to recognize is that the human rights standards actually underpins how we develop laws and policies. And such that even in 2023, when there was a global review of the Madrid International Plan on Aging, which all governments participate in, there was an open acknowledgement that, an international human rights instrument dedicated to older people is the key in moving things forward. So we need to kind of shift that to incorporate human rights and human development to be the game changer for older people human rights. So I think that's the first part. And then secondly, we want and need advocates, older people. We need different generations, coming forward to look into the future. Because this work about, human rights of older people is not just about older people today. It's about all people, right? Yeah. And we need this foundational work of a convention especially because we're going to live longer lives. And we'll never think about what longer lives could mean to us in different aspects, right? So we need this foundational work to be done. And to get there, with some of the dynamics I shared earlier about older people, we need more voices, and we need more sector voices to actively incorporate. For example, I share just one quick example. One of the NGOs in South Africa that I worked with, they were, they're very, they do great work with older people, and yet they weren't quite sure how to position human rights into it. So, they were kind of, thinking, how do I do that? How do I do that? So then what we did recently, they had an inspiring active aging campaign, right? And it's to profile stories and visuals of older people who are still striving toward active aging, regardless of what the circumstances in life. So I said, how about if we incorporate age of rights, inspiring active aging? So, and we do that with Age of Rights, right? So they actually then created a theme and incorporated a global petition. So that's the way that how we can start linking more when we talk about policies and programs is to then think about the human rights that underpin it. And we need more people, sectors, NGOs to do that. So I think those are the two key things. Thank you.
Yes, and very, very great takeaway messages. But before we close today's session, let us watch this video that echoes the rightful demands of older people from around the world. So just give me a second and we will see that video.
The human rights of older people around the world are not fully protected. Older people are often prevented from achieving their full potential.
Que nos lo merecemos todo. Hemos luchado por nuestros hijos, nuestros nietos, nuestros padres y nos merecemos una vejez tranquila, una vejez con derechos.
We need social protection. We want to maintain our independence.
Para garantizar el respeto a la voluntad, a la dignidad, a la no discriminación, a la autonomия.
Продолжает теракт. Пожилые люди не могут получить доступ к правосудию. Они социально не защищены.
Age with Rights is a global movement. We call on governments everywhere to work together to draft a new United Nations Convention on the rights of older people. The time for action is now. Together we can change the world for older people today and give us all a better future.
A convention must be drafted now.
I call upon the international community to wholeheartedly support this Convention on Rights of Older Persons.
Reclamar una convención internacional sobre los derechos de las personas mayores.
Apeluję o solidarność tej kwestii i dołączam do społeczności.
It will frame older persons as rights holders and not mere recipients of charity and welfare.
By calling on your elected representatives and other community leaders to support the drafting of a new UN Convention on Older People's Rights. Age with Rights is protecting the future for all of us.
Join the Age with Rights campaign now.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for being with us today and speaking about the rights of those who really need them. Aging is a natural process, and hopefully all of us will live to experience it. Also, let us hope that we would age gracefully with rights and not in a dehumanizing manner. Friends, we were in conversation with Margaret Young, Chairperson of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People, and we have to get those rights in our lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you.